Area of the French. Why are democratic allies with the same overall objectives undercutting each other? A defense deal among Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom that seeks to check China in the Pacific has enraged France, which has lost a lucrative submarine contract with Australia. Why are democratic allies with the same overall objectives undercutting each other? What prompted the signing of trilateral defense agreement among the US, UK and Australia? The nub of the problem is this. Australia had initially wanted conventionally powered submarines and then signed a contract with France in 2016. But the security situation in the region has since deteriorated significantly in terms of the threat from China. There has been a rethink in Canberra along the lines of look to be able to deal effectively with the expansion of Chinese naval power and China's bullying of Australia. We will need more powerful submarines. Nuclear powered submarines are far more powerful than conventionally powered ones. They are more stealthy, they have far longer range, and they can operate for longer periods underwater. And to take on the challenge from the Chinese, who are building submarines and ships in such large numbers, there is no option but to invest in better technology. The negotiations of the new AUKUS deal seems to have been ongoing for the last 6 months. Recent reports suggest that the Australians were talking to the British. The British went to the Americans, and then the three countries decided that they would take a fresh look at the issues at hand. Subsequently, Australia cancelled its French contract and announced that it will start work on the new deal with the US. Was there a way in which France could have been included in these negotiations? When you are going to ditch a friend, you don't tell them until the last moment. It was probably not fair. The French should have told in advance. They were completely blindsided, and that is one for the reasons they are so upset. 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting between Australia and French ministers, and the joint statement said the submarine program would continue. To go back to the real life example, when you are about to leave a friend, you hint, oh, I have problem with what we are doing, so let me rethink. And Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says that something to that effect had been indeed suggested, but the French say we didn't see any sign of this, and this is really absolutely unfair. It's stabbing in the back. How common is such ditching of an ally in international politics? Countries do change their minds, even though it rankles when it is among friends. In the early 1970s, President Anwar el Sadat of Egypt reversed his predecessor Gamal Abdel Nasser's policy of extremely close ties with the USSR, expelled Russian military observers, purged the government of pro-Soviet Nasserists, and following the peace treaties with Israel, switched over to the American side. More recently, in 2015, France cancelled a 1.2 billion deal struck for 4 years previously to sell two warships to Russia. But the scale of the current situation is different. France has been the only European power that has fully endorsed the idea of the Indo-Pacific that the US and Australia support. In April 2019, they took on the Chinese in the strategic Taiwan Strait. They have stood up for the freedom of navigation. In a sense, there is no difference in the objectives of France, the US, and Australia in the Pacific region. And the diplomacy could have been a lot better. Australia needed the nuclear submarines, and ironically, there is nuclear variant of the vessel. The French were selling it. It was the Australians who said they wanted the conventional sub. There will now likely be some effort from the Americans and the Australians to find a way to bring the ball to the French, and they get their anger and feeling of betrayal. What about the revenue that France will be losing? It was a large deal worth about 90 billion Australian dollars, or USD 66 billion. It was billed as the contract of the century in France, and it was very important for the French naval industry and French presence. A part of the French complaint concerns the business side of the deal and the money that has been lost. So there will likely be some legal recourse or demand for compensation. But the signing of the contract was preceded and followed by intensive political engagement between Paris and Canberra. And there was a sense of the countries could be strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific with shared objectives working together. The cancellation of the deal shattered this larger framework. What does this mean for European Union's Indo-Pacific policy? The AUKUS announcement came just before the European Union was to announce its own Indo-Pacific policy. In the European narrative, the US is undermining their efforts in the region, and the fact that Britain, which has walked out of the European Union, is involved adds a layer of complication. The feeling in some quarters in Europe is that the US is unreliable. The current situation has come soon after the chaotic American withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that Europe needs to act on its own. This is somewhat like India's strategic autonomy argument. However, there is a problem. Most European countries are reluctant to spend much on defense. They have had good as a collective and are happy to live with Americans doing more on the security side. That is unlikely to change in the near term, while some countries like France might argue for more extensive strategic autonomy, others like the Central European or Northern Americans might not. What are the implications for New Delhi considering India, France, and Australia had their first trilateral dialogue on the Indo Pacific recently? The French have cancelled a trilateral dialogue meeting of foreign ministers that was supposed to take place in New York on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. In the near term, there is a setback, but India's relationship with the US, UK, and Australia have improved dramatically over the last 5 years. France too had been a very important for India, and there is a great trust in France in New Delhi today. A quarrel among its friends is uncomfortable for India. A deal with this situation, India can step up its own security and defense engagement with France. For example, India is planning to buy more submarines, and there is the argument that it is better to have nuclear submarines rather than conventional ones because India has the same problem as Australia with regard to the Chinese naval showing up close. France could be a partner here because it is already a resident power in the Indian Ocean, and India has interest and stake in keeping it there. At the same time, India is happy to be a part of the Quad and to work with Americans, British, and Australians. The submarine question could become an important opening for India and France to start taking a fresh look at more things they can do together in the Indian Ocean. What happens here onward? There is no doubt that the objective of France are in a sense the same as those of India, Australia, the US, or UK. But there is a sense of pride, a sense of betrayal, and the loss of the contract. There are serious setbacks for the French, but the French are also realistic that they will come back, and that's where India can play an important role in reaching out to them and helping them stay engaged in the Indo-Pacific while strengthening its own partnership. Thank you.